cultural because I was born and raised in the US without parents and grandparents and great-grandparents in the Philippines. Growing up in Iowa, where I didn't even see my first real coconut at the local Hy-Vee till I was like 10. And I remember my mother saying, these are exotic fruits and they're very expensive. And I remember thinking, and then once a year we would get a coconut and go outside on the driveway and my dad would smash it open and we would all eat it. And we would also get macadamia nuts. One coconut and a bag of macadamia nuts were our like once a year treats because they were really expensive. And I just remember it being a luxury in my family to eat it. But there was never any negative connotation to it being unhealthy. You were raised in a culture where it was not just a staple of food, but it's generationally for hundreds, probably thousands of years, it's been the foundation of a culture. Mm-hmm. So when you first started hearing, hey, this could be bad, it almost had to be like culture shock to you.
Exactly. It was culture shock to us.
I think that term saturated fat is what there's a big hang up around that pertaining to human health. You know, people think, oh my goodness, my doctor told me to avoid saturated fat, or I'm prone, I'm obese, or I have a cardiac condition, or I have triglyceride issues or cholesterol issues. What people don't realize, twofold issues. Yes, dogs and cats are absolutely prone to obesity. And yes, they have the same lifestyle related diseases that many North Americans have. But dogs and cats don't have issues with heart attacks and cholesterol issues in the same sense that because dogs and cats were designed to consume saturated fat and in abundance, dogs are kind of scavenging carnivores or opportunistic omnivores, however you want to classify them. Dogs will eat anything, right? Kitties are obligate carnivores, but their diet includes a lot of saturated fat, and their bodies, I believe, are quite adapted to handle that. So some people have said, aren't you afraid about heart attacks in dogs? And I think, generally speaking, dogs don't have heart attacks like humans have heart attacks. So I think even that term saturated fat, people think it's bad. But once you realize it in context, animals actually need saturated fats. And the saturated fat in coconut oil is so beneficial for so many other parts of the body. As you mentioned, it's one of the few fats that nourishes the brain. So do you use it a lot with older patients, or what are some of the indications? I think most people are aware that coconut oil is I put it in my hair every day, use it on my face, I slather it everywhere. Yeah. I use it in hot spots, cracked nails, cracked heels, dry noses, old dog skin where they get that elephantitis-like skin, kitties that lick their bellies and it's like the best topical salve ever. Yeah. But feeding it, some people think, oh, I don't know about that. So when you feed animals coconut oil, let's talk a little bit about all the places it goes and all the good things it does. Their research has been a little bit on dogs in canine cognitive decline, but there is a vast amount of research on the human side of things. That's probably the biggest shocker to me is the amount of research coming out on the biohackers, the metabolic summits, Weston Price, all of these great organizations, PhD researchers saying, oh my gosh, we need to stop and look at coconut-derived ketones and what it can do for turning on our brains. Yeah. Of course, yes, it's good for the immune system. And yes, it's great antifungal, antiviral, antibacterial. But when it comes to providing cellular energy that gets into the brain, the research is really shockingly amazing. And yet it hasn't really, a lot of that research hasn't trickled down as you would have expected to veterinary medicine.
Yeah, that's true.
Talk a little bit about that, because I view coconut oil as the anti-inflammatory fat. So if I have any condition, anything that ends in itis, including, and I'm glad that you mentioned pancreatitis, because that's the one thing that I get more emails from other veterinarians saying, what? And you have to stop and explain that the shorter chain fatty acids don't require lipase release. So it's non-taxing to the pancreas and it's kind of passively diffused through the GI tract. I think they're now discovering that there may be some lymph involvement, that there could be some chylomicron involvement, but it's generally speaking, it's not this active digestive process that requires a tremendous amount of lipase that taxes the lymphatic system. Not at all. In fact, my first introduction to MCTs and my whole life was in veterinary school when they talked about using MCT, specifically formulated MCT oil for lymphangiectasia and chylomicron disease.
Yes.
So veterinarians have all heard of MCT oil. We just didn't connect it to coconut oil. So that's something that I think veterinarians still are maybe okay with MCTs, and for some reason there's a disconnect when it comes to the whole food source. I think integrative veterinarians or functional medicine doctors get that we always try to do the whole food thing versus the piecing out and teasing out of fractionated parts and pieces of coconut oil. Can you talk a little bit, question to Dr. Mark Morris. Dr. Mark Morris was the PhD wildlife biologist that kind of helped our corner of the earth coin the term biologically appropriate for dogs. He was the guy that did the research that let domesticated dogs and wild wolves, 2 cohorts, eat as much carb, protein, and fat as they wanted. And then he just let them graze as much as they wanted over a period of time to see what they would choose instinctually on their own. And absolutely what he found, which helped corroborate all of us saying we need to feed dogs more of a biologically appropriate diet, he was talking about macronutrients, meaning what percentage of the diet is protein and what percentage of the diet was fat. And what he found with both dogs and wild wolves is that if left to select on their own, all species of canines will first gorge on fat. And once they have enough fat to nourish their brain, they will then gorge on protein and very little, if any, carbohydrate, less than 10%. They would nibble on carbohydrate. I think probably more for roughage. They needed some grasses for fiber, but they met their fiber requirement last with 10% carbohydrates. They ate fat first, then protein. When our dogs and cats. So when it comes to the fat category, some of the healthiest fats we absolutely could select for our pets, in my opinion, would be coconut oil because it is stable. It doesn't go rancid. It nourishes the body in ways that are low stress metabolically. And this is proven over and over on the health side of things. I just see summits all the time talking about, especially lipid summits, where they're really diving into the science of how healthy fats so miraculously help humans cope with inflammation. And there's a lot of research that because coconut oil has just trended here. It's considered kind of a new age, kind of fad supplement in the last 20 years. But we have to stop and recognize that our country is relatively new compared to a bunch of other civilizations who have been consuming this food for thousands of years. So what appears to be as a trendy fad in the US, if you trace it back to its origins, it's an ancient, healthful food that many cultures have relied on for themselves and their livestock for thousands of years, healthfully and intuitively and naturally. And out of that ancient wisdom, you've brought forth new knowledge to share with other parts of the country, other parts of the world, including the US. You feel comfortable using it. And then once you do start using it, I think it's a slippery slope because you can't stop. It fixes one condition, so you use it for the next and the next. And then, as you mentioned, Carmina, you end up using it on all your pets for everything because you see the vast benefits of literally nose to tail improvement by incorporating this really beautiful fat into an animal's lifestyle.